You may be aware that we're sitting in the Borrett room, and I'd like to welcome Lloyd Borrett, who the room's named after. I don't think we've seen you here for a long time, Lloyd, but welcome. Enjoy the night, and you'll be able to mingle at interval. So, just remember, those of you that are home, to turn your microphones off. I don't think anyone here is probably on Zoom that can interfere, but if you're looking at us on Zoom, we need your microphones off. Tonight we've got, I've lost his name, Grant. I've got Grant, but that will do us. I thought I had his name written down here, and I haven't. Okay. So welcome, Grant. Grant is the founder and CEO of Blackmagic Design and has become one of the world's leading innovators of creative video tech. His goal was, and still is, to empower creativity by making film, television, streaming and AV production equipment affordable for everyone. Because of Grant Petty, I knew his name appeared somewhere, nearly every film, TV show, commercial music, music video, live concert you watch was created with Blackmagic Design product. Blackmagic Design, with more than 1,400 employees in 7 countries, has tens of millions of customers around the world. This includes Oscar-winning cinematographers to 15-year-old students, and projects from Avatar, Star Wars, The Last Jedi, to Game of Thrones, the AFL. Grant, I read this earlier. I don't know how much involved with the AFL you are, but it's very distorted, because I've watched it sometimes, and I'm quite sure some of those points that have been awarded to Carlton really did go through the goals, and they just the distortion of the video was a bit crook. But also Elton John's tour and the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. Grant is not looking for just profits and openly refutes the thought that he should act like other businesses. He is focused on design and problem solving and has assembled world-leading software, hardware, R&D, industrial design, interface design, manufacturing and marketing, and focused them all on design and creativity. He has also built a corporate culture that has turned every part of the company into an invention factory. The creative process starts with identifying a problem, and I've just mentioned one, and then reconceptualizing the entire way a product is made, sold and used. Grant has taken his passion for problem fixing and designed into the M&A space, acquiring 7 companies, including Sydney's Fairlight Inn, whatever that is, he might tell us, and Davinci, and brought each of these companies back from the dead. Since acquiring Davinci, a company that was losing $1 million a month before being acquired, is now being the most used professional post-production software in the world. So welcome, Grant, and over to you.
Thanks for that intro. That was a hell of an intro. So yeah, we've done 7 acquisitions. I thought what I might do, because I wasn't quite sure, I've been working till 2 a.m. since COVID started every day, because it's just some problem going on somewhere in the world. So, but the great thing is we do everything in-house, so we've got a lot of control, so we've been able to just roll with all the stuff that's coming at us. Supply chains are the big issue at the moment. The car industry decided that they're going to cancel all their orders on electronics component suppliers who profile their factories, so they've got, capacity within an inch of their lives. And then, of course, in a pandemic, people don't take public transport, so car sales actually went up, not down, and then the whole world's gone nuts, and everyone's just panic buying parts. So it's really exciting. So I thought what I might do is just go through some of our product lines and show you a bit about what we do. And all the product photos I'm going to show are, we have an in-house marketing department. We do all that photography and stuff ourselves, and all the marketing ourselves. Then I was going to talk through a product development process, how we kind of develop a project and how we look at it. And then I was going to show you a little bit about Davinci. It's okay, I've got a clicker. So, and I was going to talk a bit about Davinci Resolve. And we have a new cut page in Davinci Resolve, which is editing kind of in a bit of a different way. So I thought I might just talk about that a little bit. But, you know, if you guys want to ask questions and it's getting boring, just let me know and we could just do a bit of Q&A. So I wasn't really quite sure what you guys were mostly interested in, but I thought it would be more technical sort of centric. So I thought I'd talk about that. Anyway, I'll get into it. So we have, in fact, there's a pocket camera up the back that's recording this. But we have, obviously we do cameras as one of the product lines we have. This is the pocket camera. This is actually the new 6K Pro pocket camera. I haven't have any products unannounced in this slideshow. I rushed it really when I put it together, so it'll be pretty bad. But I think I'll be okay. You can see it's a compact camera. We actually took our really big digital film camera and shrunk it down into a smaller camera. This one has an optional viewfinder you can put on top. The screen folds out. It's a digital film camera, so it's got a wide dynamic range. So the idea is to capture. We only got into cameras because we had Davinci, and it was difficult to color correct content that's come from a video camera. So what we really wanted was something with a wide dynamic range. So when you lift the blacks up, you get actually more detail. You don't just get sort of a grey, you know. Same with the whites. When you pull the white down in color correction, you want more detail. So you really want a lot of contrast range. And so, you know, high dynamic range is actually something televisions and everything do now. But when we first started in cameras, it was a bit more rare, and it's something we needed because video cameras can't do that. And so it's been quite popular. They've been doing very well, and we've got a lot of really good customers using them. It's actually shocking what people do. It's amazing when you build a product, and then it gets out there and you see what the customers actually do with it. It's just amazing, you know. And it's always the people you don't expect do the most amazing things. It's pretty cool. Although the people you do expect to do amazing things also do amazing things. So this is the pocket camera. It's got a Canon style lenses it supports. This is the 6K Pro version. It's got ND filters, electronic ND filters in it, and so it's the most powerful model we have. You can see the screen folds out. There's the viewfinder. So you see we do all the industrial design in house, and in fact all the manufacturing in house, and all this photography's been done in house. Obviously the models aren't in house. We don't have people. Well, we actually do have people look that pretty. We've got a gym, so that's the most terrifying room. I park my push bike in the gym, and it's really scary when I walk through because if you bump someone, everyone's stronger than you are. Then again, my kids are stronger than I am. So we also have higher end cameras. We developed our own 12K sensor, and so we have a 12K camera. The reason we did that is we wanted to go well beyond 8K, so we have enough color resolution in the sensor because, you know, it's not a prism based camera because you get optical distortions. It's not Bayer. It's actually a different pattern. It's our own color layout pattern. But when you convert, you get basically 8K and RGB because you have enough excess resolution to be able to make sure you get full bandwidth color. So we went to 12K. So there it is there. And that's been doing quite well for obviously higher end feature films and things like that. And you see we've got, we actually did that marketing in our building. It was composed in. That was pretty cool when you see the guys jump through the sugar glass wall, and it's pretty fun that day. It makes a hell of a mess though when they do it. But you see we also have a sort of more conventional sensor we put in the same body. So we have a broadcast camera version of it. That uses a different lens mount that's very good for zooming in and out without changing focus. So that's what those big complicated lenses are. They're really expensive, but they're parfocal, which means when you're zooming in and out, you get beautiful electronic zoom control, but the focus doesn't change. So in fact, you'll notice sometimes broadcast guys will zoom in and focus and then zoom back. So they can go in and out and the focus is perfect. So we have a variation of that camera that's cheaper that does broadcast type work. And you can even rig it up with these really big lenses, and these lenses are amazing. That's what they do sports with and things like that. We even have a SMPTE fiber cable adapter on the back that runs 2 kilometers, will power the camera 2 kilometers away and runs all the communication. It's actually an IP link to the camera. It's 10G optical Ethernet actually to the camera. But it's using a standard sort of SMPTE fiber, which is a television industry fiber optic cable. So the connectors are defined as part of the standards. They're really quite robust and reliable. And there's extra power pins in there. And we actually used a local power supply manufacturer. We actually outsourced that bit of design any time we've ever done it. We didn't trust ourselves to do a power supply that was safe enough to handle, there's all kinds of safety issues when you're running 2 kilometers. If the cable's damaged, you've got to be able to handle that. So we used a company that does medical power supplies, and we actually designed it to a medical grade. We didn't certify it to medical, but we designed it to that. So the idea is, because the last thing we need is if there's a damaged cable and it's lying in a stadium, it rains, and someone gets a shock. So it's really, safety is a super thing. In fact, the demo, when we launched it, I basically put the cable in a tub of water and put my hand in there, and all the engineers were freaking out, and they're all standing around, I think, but they got all the guys that know how to do resuscitation because they were concerned with the demo. But it was okay. I mean, we paid all this money for safety, like it's going to work, right? So they're all freaking out. But it was pretty funny. It's a great demo. But it's great because you can have a single cable. We can do multiple return feeds and Ultra HD back and tally and talk back. So this is a couple of the cameras using the fibers, doing a cooking show. So you can see that's how they work, and they've got the lenses. And we have little switches. In fact, there's actually one of these switches down there. So this is a little switch we just introduced recently. It's got 8 inputs, HDMI inputs. You can do, there's a USB on it that works like a webcam, but it also does live streaming directly out of it. That's $1,000, I think, that one, US. But it's got a multi-view in it, so you can do like 16 different views. So you can look at all the sources coming in, and you can do switching between video sources, and it's great for live stuff. In fact, live production is very fast because like if we have multiple cameras here, and so if you're switching that live, then at the end of the talk, the program's finished. You don't have to do any editing. So live production can be really nice for that. But we also have bigger, that's actually the same switcher, but plugged into the bigger panels. So there's a camera control panel, so you can adjust that. In fact, that switcher will talk to that camera down there and adjust color correction and everything in it. In fact, the light's on. I'll actually use recording, so that's why. But well, it is plugged into there, so that's all cool. We have bigger panels, so we have obviously bigger switches. We've got switches up to 40 inputs and 24 different video outputs. So when you're doing really large, like concerts, and they've got tons of cameras, like particularly concerts, we've got cameras everywhere, all over the, the band and everything, and so it can really add up quickly. So some of the switches are quite big. We even have a top switcher that does 8K. You can see different situations there, right up to this really big panel that we have that's handles 40 different inputs, and it's 4 ME, which means it's like 4 switches in one. So you got all the transition stuff, and you have it repeated 4 times, and people set up things on the other MEs while they're actually switching the program, so it can get really complex. We have live streaming products. This is a little product we introduced recently that basically does live streaming. It's a little converter that plugs it. It does webcam, so if you plug it in, but basically it takes an SDI video input and converts it and live streams directly out of it. You can plug a phone into it. It'll actually live stream through the phone. So you're using mobile data, but it's got an Ethernet connector on the back. So, and you can see people use it for all kinds of different uses. You can plug a camera straight into it, or you can plug it into one of the professional switches. This switch has got live streaming in it, but if you're using the professional switches, then you add a little module for that. You can see it's got a live status output, so we've got all this technical detail about the video format and sort of the streaming data rates and the cache depth and all kinds of things. So it generates that live video out. Even the audio scrolls along like a little audio waveform, so you've got the last 6 seconds of video and audio, so you can tell what's going on, which can be really nice if you're using a product like this. It's kind of like the modern equivalent of a broadcast television transmitter, except it's streaming. So we wanted to include the kind of technical stuff you need to sort of have the same sort of status that you'd have on one of these big transmitters. It's just a small streaming product, but it's still got the same professional scariness that you have when you're trying to stay on air. You've got to stay on air for a stream, so it's the same kind of stresses. So you got to design something that's more of a broadcast centric thing. We make a whole lot of different routers and waveform monitors and audio monitoring and a whole bunch of sort of broadcast products as well. And we make little recorders with screens in them, so you can plug them into cameras and do various types of recordings and screens. We've got Davinci Resolve, and this is the little speed editor for doing editing. It's sort of search dial and everything, and you can do editing on it. You can also do color correction. So there's the color panels that we make, and there's the color page in Davinci. Davinci's got editing, color correction, audio, so you can actually, it's got audio built in. That's a new little audio panel we did. That's actually set into the desk there. It's actually a bit thicker than that because they're flying faders. And we also have really big audio desks, and it also does visual effects as well, all in the one app. And we acquired Davinci. We built the audio, the editing ourselves, and we acquired Fairlight, which was a Sydney company that did audio post-production, and that's the consoles they made, but we re-engineered the whole thing and improved the quality, and we sell it all modular, so you can sort of build up as you go. And there's all the screens. That whole thing is just being run. In fact, the screens actually have a computer, like they're not a computer, it's actually an embedded processor, but it's running Blackmagic OS. All our products now run Blackmagic OS. It's our own operating system that we developed. And you can see the color correction here. Oh, what's that? Some being communicated from aliens coming from outer space. So you can see you can even collaborate with Davinci. It supports multiple users working together, and they can all work on the same project. We also have an external GPU product. We actually developed this. Apple kind of asked us to build it. So we went, they kind of needed a product like that. So we went off and designed, and I thought I could talk about how we went through that process of design. Actually, I got some photos of the early days of starting out Blackmagic. One of the guys in turn was like, hey, show them some of the early photos. Actually, I must admit, I haven't looked at these photos. I hope there's nothing weird in there. So there's us using a pasta cooker to basically make our first board before the morning of a show. We're about to go out to a show. And we didn't have a really good equipment at that point. So we're hand making everything, but the product had analog on it. So I didn't want to use a little oven we had because it was going to overheat the board, and the analog, with analog, it's a concern. This is like 2002 or something like that. So it's quite a while ago now. I mean, I did notice the other day that I'm wearing the same belt, so that's kind of scary. Yeah, that's frightening. Um, but what we did is there's a process called vapor phase where you basically have this fluid that boils at 200 degrees. And so I realized, hey, if I get a pasta cooker, because I had to make the board, like the board PCBs come in that morning, we had to assemble them and then basically solder them. And I was worried about using the oven because it was going to potentially overheat the boards. And there's analog on there. We've got no time to debug or test. And we've only got one board of each because we prototype got the PCB. So they come in that morning.
Yes, what were you saying?
Used vapor phase so we basically got a pasta cooker and boiled the fluid. It came up and soldered the board. The great thing about vapor phase is you can't overheat. Like steaming with cooking, you can't overheat the board because you can't get above the vapor temperature, like the boiling temperature of the fluid. And also it's oxygen free, actually. The soldering process is great, but surface tension on the solder is more, so the components tend to flip up. And so it's not actually reliable when you look at the overall production process because you get this process called tombstoning where the components pop up. But it is really good if the components stay down and solder properly. Then it's fantastic because it's oxygen free because the fluid coats everything. But we're doing it in the kitchen of a post-production company that we're starting the company at the back. So we didn't really want them to see this because that's where the client food's done. But we used a pasta cooker and we actually managed to solder the boards. They worked first time. And then we went off to the show that afternoon over in the US, Vegas. It was a NAB show in Vegas. And we showed off and launched the 2 new products. So it was pretty cool. There's the board in the pasta cooker. So you can see it just sits there and the fluid will come up and it'll coat the board. And then that was actually our first product. It'll coat the board and then solder it all. This is one of our earlier trade show booths. So you can see we were very tiny in those days, that's a 6 meter by 6 meter booth. And it was actually a terrible booth because we kept running around and around trying to find each other. So from then on, we never did a booth that had 2 sides on it because it's horrible. It's just, if you ever do it, like if you want to start a company and make a product, make something that works and just go to trade shows. You'll meet tons of people, talk to customers, find out how things are going, get all good feedback, but don't build a booth with 2 sides on it because when there's only like 4 of you, you're running around and around trying to keep track of each other. So it was horrible. Turns out we actually had a meeting room in there and a storeroom, and then we had some meetings with some big companies and we just couldn't all fit in there. It was really bizarre. It was made of this foam stuff, but it was a good thing. It worked well, and it was our second ever trade show booth, I believe. So there's us building one of the capture cards as a cake. So we used to have little, food things. Wow, everyone's still there. Look at that. I can recognize almost everyone. They're all still there. It's pretty cool. Although we're all a bit older now, but we used to bring food in occasionally and have a bit of fun. And one of the guys' wives used to make cakes in the shape of things. So we'd get her to do various cakes for us in different products. So the film scanner didn't work that well. It sort of fell apart because it was so big, but that was a huge cake. And then everyone had black lips because there's all this black icing. So you're eating it. And it's just like terrible, We built a converter that was in a machined aluminium case, and we thought, what better way to demo how tough it is by running it over with a tank? So we found a guy's got a Centurion tank. He was a psycho. I don't know why. He was complaining and like bitterly anti-left wing, which is funny in itself, but not when he's got a tank. And he was complaining about the fact he couldn't get the newer tank that they just decommissioned. I'm like, I wouldn't give you a tank. You shouldn't have the tank you've got. The guy was like just constantly ranting, and then he bogged his tank, which was a bit of a shame. But we did get enough video of it, and we put it with a bit of music, and we had the tank running over the converter. So we put the converter down and ran video through it, and it ran over it, and it actually survived. See, it kept working. So that's how tough it was. It was pretty cool. Sometimes, when you're learning marketing, you do some pretty crazy kind of demos and stuff, but that's the fun part of it. A lot of it doesn't work, but some of it does. But we thought it was funny. This is when we bought Davinci, and we were first starting out redesigning the panel, and they had a control panel that was sandcast. It was warped, and it had like Linux computers in it. It's crashing all the time. And it was our first acquisition. So the first thing we need to do is redesign the panel and get it to reliable and get it CE approved and all that. And this is us, the first castings coming out. We die cast it. So it was actually really accurate. We redesigned it so that, they had the sides coming together. So you get gaps and, in fact, a guy poked his sunglasses and it was that bad. So we made sure that the top lid went over the top and really dramatically improved the quality of the product and just made the whole thing a USB peripheral. So it was really simple. Here's us designing our first camera. So we made we mounted the sensor board in sort of a rig that we could put on a tripod. So we had some way, and we basically emulated the whole camera in software. So we could do all the code to kind of get, because, sensors don't create good pictures at all. You got to do a lot, particularly if you want to do wide dynamic range, you got to get really low noise floor, which means the amplifiers in the sensor board have to be really, really low noise. And also you got to get the heat out of the sensor because heat becomes noise and it all brings the noise floor up. So you can't get a wide dynamic range because you can't get the black level down enough. So a lot of work goes into the power supply designs on the back of the sensor. And we just did all the color science. That was our first color science. And it was actually pretty dramatic. When we launched the product, it went really well. There's a lot of people really waiting for something with wide dynamic range that was affordable. So it was a very simple camera. It didn't have all the buttons and everything. There's the camera there. It's, you know, it's all, you know, it's almost iconic, but it did have a photo lens, and it was a very software driven camera. So it had a software screen, and we recorded normal video files, not weird camera files. We just used an SSD, you slid into the side of it. In fact, that's the earlier version. Originally, it actually was a studio camera, but then we got so frustrated asking other camera companies if they could build something more affordable with wide dynamic range that we ended up giving up and putting an SSD in it and actually making that product. But originally, we were trying to make a camera for like live production, and so we changed it. So the side all became feel like that was the SSD on the side, so you could slide an SSD in there. So that's actually a slightly early version of it. There it is there doing its first video shoot. So we actually went into a bar. One of the guys had a bar, and we went in there and we sort of shot a whole bunch of stuff. It was actually pretty nice. And we had a professional DOP, the friend of ours that we knew, he did all the shoot for us. And so he was kind of exploring how it worked. And there's after the show when we launched it. So we're all pretty tired. We did this little tiki bar thing on the booth at, in America at NAB, and launched it there, and it went down really well. And it was a good introduction to cameras, but we really, in the fact that we needed something for Davinci, and we had, you know, relaunched Davinci at that point. We had a Mac version, and we then did a Windows version later. We had a free version, and it just, we had all these people, we were trying to get more colorists in the world. We thought that everything would look a lot better if everything was color corrected, because most video stuff wasn't color corrected, it was only films. And Davinci used to cost $350,000 up to $800,000 for a system. And we then relaunched it 6 months later with a $1,000 Mac version. And then it came to $295. And then we actually did a free version. And the free version is actually now the main version. It's actually really powerful. The $300 one is where we just put sort of, you know, really advanced IP, like all the AI stuff's in there, and, you know, some things that we license and stuff like that. So, so it's really cool. And we have a lot of panels and color panels and things that go with it. So this camera now gave us really good wide dynamic range pictures that we could then color grade, and the results are incredible. So I thought I might just show a little quick video, which is I'm not sure if the audio will work, but this is this is 2017, so it's a few years ago, but it shows a bit like what our trade shows are now. So this is the show in Vegas. So you can see we had a big banner on the strip. So it's obviously 2017. So we have hall banners with new products on them. We're having so many products, it can be difficult sort of explaining some of the new things to people. So, and the whole the front of the hall, we have Davinci Resolve on there. And there's also a camera banner on the side there. So there's our booth. It's in the front of the hall when you first come in. It's actually bigger than that now. There's the camera demo area. So we have all the cameras lined up. We have a set there. That's the press conference area behind. On the morning of the show opening, we do a press conference, which we live stream. And there's the products. This was when we launched Fairlight for the first time. So we relaunched it. And that's behind the wall. We actually have a live production set up, so we can do a live stream. That's their older panel. And there's the color correction of the cameras. There's the trade show guys doing, setting up some of the things. And that's us doing a bit of a chat before the press conference. We have about 200 to 300 press used to show up. I'm not sure what's going to happen after COVID, of course. It's going to be a bit of a rough 3 years. They get about 80 to 100,000 people go to the show. So it's quite a lot. It's huge trade show halls. First time I went there, I sort of joked to the guys, I don't think I can see the end of the hall because it curves over the earth, you know, everything is so big in the US, and it's so nice to launch products in the US because Americans are so open about who they are. They're really down on themselves at the moment. I don't know why they're complaining so much about who they are. Like I remember one guy was taking a photo of something. He goes, "Oh, do you want to go over there so you don't get the American flag in the shot?" It's like, I'm in America. Why would I not get the American flag in the shot? Like, I don't know what's happened to the US. They used to be so full of confidence. Now they seem to have lost their confidence. But the great thing about launching products in America is that customers are like, they see what you're doing. Oh, that's really interesting. I could do this with it. I'm doing it. And then they suddenly tell you their life story, and you take that with you. So no data or analysis is ever going to match that. And so you have all these fantastic conversations with people, and you take away the spirit of each person and who they are. And then when you're thinking about that, when you're designing your next product. So it's super, super important. So I love going to shows and launching products that shows in the US because people are so open with who they are and what they're doing, and they just brain dump to you. And then you get a chance to go, oh, that's interesting. And then they tell you about problems and go, well, we could do this. And before you know, you've just invented a product right there. That's why we do the show. You don't sell stuff at trade shows. You chat with people, you know? So we do a big dealer event on the night before the show. So we can give some of the dealers a bit of a brief on what's coming. And we had a bit of food and it's a lot of conversations and it's a chance to meet with everyone. This guy's great. He does the voiceover for the How It's Made show, which is one of my favorite shows. on television. At the end of the show, we all get together and have a big group photo. We have about 900 people travel from all over the world, different offices to go to the show. We're all pretty worn out at that point, but it's always a lot of fun. Then we all just get in there and pack everything up, and then we go to dinner. So we get the whole show stripped down in about, it used to take me 4 hours to pack a 3 by 6 meter booth up with 3 demo stations. I think we ripped that place apart in about 2.5 hours now, because everyone gets in there with power drills and just completely tears the booth apart. And then, of course, the trade show guys get in there and do their thing. So I thought I'd talk about designing a product now. So the eGPU product we did, Apple sort of said, hey, we want to sort of do an eGPU product. Do you guys want to build them? We're like, yeah, well, we need something for Davinci, because all these laptops are fantastic. I mean, you get all-day battery power. Remember the old days where people used to plug the power bricks in all the time? You don't really do that anymore. So it's amazing when you think of how difficult it is to design a laptop. It's a tough design challenge. You want it to have low power enough to basically last all day, but then people want to video edit on it. I mean, it's really quite demanding what people actually ask these laptops to do these days. Desktop computers, it's just a desktop computer, but these laptops really must be an incredibly painful design process to get them to be able to do that. So one of the great things about adding an external GPU is you plug it into the Thunderbolt and they've got all this GPU power, and that's what we needed with Davinci. But the difficulty we had is that there was, our version of the way we wanted to do a GPU product, there's tons of little boxes with fans and they're sort of, computer peripherals, but we wanted to do something that really was suited to our industry, which would be applicable to a wider industry. But particularly for us, it's, we've got people doing editing and audio, so they don't want something that's screaming. So I thought about design. If you think about a new product, I like to think of it from the point of view of a product character. Like a product's like a person and it's got a character, and you're basically going to construct it, and you've got complete freedom to do that. So the big question is, well, what is its character? What should it be? And, we sort of asked the Apple guys, and they weren't really sure. They would, the reason we were doing it is because they were busy doing other stuff. So we thought, okay, well, I guess from our point of view, these are some of the thoughts. We wanted to obviously be appealing to customers from creative industries that had to sort of look nice. We want to definitely sort of differentiate from those harsher gaming products like black and chrome and all that kind of stuff. That's very much how young male 18 to 35 or 16 to 35 kind of age group, there's a particular style that young men like. We had to make it somewhat compatible with Apple's tastes in product design, but we didn't want to make it look like an Apple product, because you see a lot of companies like Disc Array guys do that, and it just looks really tacky. No one's ever going to be able to get to the same sort of finish that people like Apple can do, because they're mass producing it and they're just really good at it. And you'll often see like a cheap peripheral try to copy that, and they just don't do it because they just don't put the money in to do that. And we can actually able to do that. But my thinking is it doesn't have to look like an Apple product. It has to look like the kind of product that someone with similar tastes would like. So it's a compatible or sort of fashion choice almost, if you probably want to describe it like that. So it had to be visually compatible with Apple products, but not look like a Mac. We obviously needed to be low noise because we need audio people to use it. So we didn't want any fan noise, but you had to have a fan. I mean, GPUs, there's a big GPU and it pulls a lot of heat. And we felt that it needed to have a bit of a supercomputer vibe, a bit of a kind of feel like a supercomputer. Because that's what you're really plugging in, and we had to accommodate more powerful GPUs, which we actually then did do a more powerful version of it. So this is, so what we do when we start out, we talk to industrial design, we think about the character. Then the industrial design guys sort of sit down and start to think about it, and they do. And this is a really important phase. It's the sketching sort of phase where they sketch things and think about styles, and they sort of, map out different sort of styles of what things could be, just trying different things. They're really, in this point, they're trying to think of as many different things as they can, come at it from different angles and different styles. But then they sort of start to settle on some things that they think are good. And often when we do a product, we could have 3 or 4 different styles that we look at, and then we have to really think about what might be the best, fit for the purpose. And you can see they're getting towards the sort of design we end up choosing. And you can see the chosen concept became this one. And the reason I liked it is I thought it looked really sleek. It had a similar kind of metallic look to, that is actually machined aluminium. But it had that nice grid on the top, which there's actually a sort of a honeycomb look underneath. It definitely had a supercomputer vibe to it, like a little supercomputer. It looked sort of good next to a computer. That's Apple's Macs at the time. I think they're still the same. I'm not sure if they've changed. So it kind of had a bit of a compatible vibe, to the whole thing. You can see on the back, there's a bunch of USB. It's Thunderbolt 3 and there's loop through. So we have to power not only the GPU, we also have to power the USB peripherals and the Thunderbolt product downstream. And then Thunderbolt's actually got a fair bit of power, so we have to be able to do all that. So it has actually quite a beefy power supply in it, which means you've got to get rid of the heat from that. So there's heat issues. So you can see on the back panel there. So it's really sleek and simple. It had a HDMI connection on it. So you see the top of the design, and this is where it really sort of looked a bit like a supercomputer. It's got this kind of sort of nice, smooth sort of style, but it's got this honeycomb vibe under it. So it kind of has, when you look deeper at it, you sort of see these extra details. And inside under there is really basically heatsink and GPU. You can see on the bottom, it sort of, again, even underneath, it's got this nice style, and the kind of way the foot interacts with the body case design kind of gives it it feels like it's levitating a little bit off the desk. You can see the internal structure, which is also where all the engineering guys in industrial design deeply think about what's going on. So you can see the way we did a fluid-based radiator so we can get the heat out of the GPU. These GPUs use a ton of heat, and we've got a really big fan in there, which is a custom fan design, and it spins really slowly and very quietly, so we can get the thing ventilated without a lot of heat. And the grid in the bottom has got the same honeycomb design, but we actually changed the shapes of the honeycombs to direct the airflow up through the power supply or through the heatsink, so we can regulate based on the pattern hole design where the airflow goes through. So you can see here's an exploded view. This has all come out of the CAD systems the industrial design guys use. And so you can see the component parts of it, different assemblies. And we did a bunch of performance profiling to see what kind of benefits we got. So this was, at the time, this was a 13-inch MacBook Pro. They've actually had like 2 or 3 versions after this. This measurement data is a little bit old now. The slide's a little bit old. You can see some various processing and how much faster it was. It was really giving us a good bump. And you can see even on the more powerful model they had at the time, it was still pretty powerful. Although now they've got the M1 processors out, and they're actually really quite powerful. I'm quite surprised how much power they managed to get. They've got a lot of GPU in them, so they're really good. And Davinci also will use more than one GPU, so it's actually mapping across that really well. We did some thermal analysis. We've got software that does thermal analysis. So we've got obviously a lot of simulation software for various kinds of things in-house. And so we did a bunch of thermal simulation to see if the design was going to be able to handle what we wanted it to do. So we were generating, simulations of the temperature and everything. Turned out that the GPU was conducting its heat into the case of the GPU really well. We were sort of using the components like the chips we'd normally be using. They don't conduct into the case as well thermally because they don't really need to. But I think the GPU guys are so good at getting rid of heat that they're really good at connecting the die into the package so they can get the heat out. So our performance numbers came in a lot better than this, which was quite good. And of course, we run up to higher temperatures and work out what's going to happen, so we kind of know if we're going to be okay. Again, we didn't want a lot of heat into the case. We wanted the case to be cool, and we wanted the airflow coming at the top not to be able to be too hot, and it'll also be quiet. And sort of we can do a regional sort of mapping of where the hotspots are going to be. I didn't change one of the specs there didn't change it to white. And some dimensions, so it was fairly compact. And you can see, it looked pretty good next to Davinci. So I thought then I might just bring up Davinci and show you some editing software. And we've basically, you guys have probably seen editing software before, but we wanted to redesign the way editing works. So I'll actually have to launch Davinci. So bear with me for a second. I'll just do it. No, it's okay because I can. Run this version before. I think I installed it when the guys had the final version. I haven't actually run it. So 17.1. It's just 17. It's not actually 0.1. I haven't actually done an update for a while. Yeah. It's different. So, no? What's all that? Ah, yeah, because you got to. Okay, I know what I'll do. Yeah. I'll do that system preferences. No, I'll just mirror. Show mirroring option. Technology. So I'll talk about this. One thing I can do. So this is actually running on a really low resolution projector. It's only 400 something, but So what we did is, so you notice it's a little bit different. In fact, I'll put a couple of clips down. This probably works better if. Yeah, well, I'll just drop some stuff down. So what we wanted to do, so it's a bit hard to see because the resolution of the projector is really slow. But what we wanted to do is, the problem with editing, and what we've, well, it's not that I noticed editing was changing, but it was changing. Essentially what was happening is that you've got people that are a one-man band, and Davinci had been obviously designed for high-end Hollywood, and then obviously we brought it to a wider market. But I was concerned about trying to solve the problem of people that are shooting and editing themselves, which is really obviously common. I mean, anyone who owns a camera probably does that. And so, you know, Davinci was a lot more than just a high-end tool where you went along to some company who does editing for you, and that's sort of changing, or it's changed quite dramatically. What I was trying to do is I thought, well, if you're, say, for example, you're out doing, well, actually, say you're here and you're recording all this, you want to turn the edit around as quick as possible because the people that want to know what happened. So that the question then becomes, how can you speed up the process of shooting and editing? Well, you can't really speed up the process of shooting because I'm talking to you right now and it takes as long as it takes for us to have a conversation. So you can't actually make the shooting part faster. But what you can do is speed up the edit. So I thought, okay, we've got to make the editing process really fast. And so how would we do that? And one of the things we did in the edit page, because there's different pages, I'll actually show you the pages in Davinci quickly. So we have that page. So we have editing. This is the edit page. And you can see it's not really designed to run on small screens. This is the color page. It's actually Fusion. Fusion, yeah, Fusion comes up there. There's the color page. Yep. But it's just, this is the Fairlight audio page, but it just can't handle, that's the media page. So you've got these different pages. Now, there's no way Davinci can handle this. It needs basically a 1080 HD monitor, but a lot of people are running smaller screens, particularly on laptops. So I wanted the cut page to be able to handle smaller monitors. You know, it's because Davinci was a high-end tool, there's almost this expectation that everything it was ever going to be running on was a higher-end computer, but that's not always the case. So I felt like we could do a few things if we had a better editing page. Well, not a better editing page, but a different kind of editing. There's basically a different kind of editing culture. It's essentially people trying to turn things around really fast. So the way I looked at this is I thought, well, if we have one viewer instead of two, which the editing page has, and then we can get it to be smaller, which it's actually doing here. It's doing on this. This is probably the smallest monitor I've ever run it on. But the other thing we wanted to do is that we have this editing process with the mouse. Is when you move the mouse around the edit point, it changes to different tools automatically. And I can show you that quickly. You see here. So if I want to trim, I can roll and edit. I can trim like that. I can also slip a clip in the space and see the edit change. So that's all nice. The problem is if you're in the normal edit page, and you've got a long edit that's 60 minutes or something like that, or even 30 minutes, it's so far zoomed out that you can't see what you've got. You can't use any of those trim tools. You've got to then zoom in. So you zoom in, you do your trimming, you zoom back out again, move around the timeline, zoom back in again. There's all this zooming, and it was really frustrating. I thought, it'd be nice if you didn't have to do that. And the way to do that would be to have a dual timeline. So you'd have the whole edit length at the top, but you'd have a zoomed in proportion at the bottom, and that bottom part doesn't change its zoom level. So you can go in there and you can always use the trim tools because it's always at a zoom level that's good enough to do that. But the top timeline is the whole thing, and you can actually trim in the top timeline as well. So you can do that. But obviously it's a lot more magnified. And you can even drag a clip from the bottom timeline, move it up the top, drag it right down the edit and drop it down the end and all sort of stuff. So I thought essentially a dual timeline that's interactive would be good. So I was thinking about some of these ideas and I thought we actually need a different page, like, because if I do any of this to the edit page, everyone's going to kill me because you're going to change the professional page that all the professional guys use. But at the same time, I'm thinking we need something better. And so I started thinking of these bits and then I started thinking a bit deeper about it going, what am I really doing here? And I realized what I'm doing is I'm applying manufacturing ideas to editing. If you think of manufacturing, anyone that's been in a manufacturing business will understand it's not as simple as everyone thinks it is. it's actually quite a complex process. It's a process of eliminating waste, and waste in manufacturing is any unintended movement that doesn't basically result in the product being built. What you're trying to do is you're trying to move the parts close, you're trying to have things feeding in, you're trying to essentially allow everyone on the production line to do the least amount of work to get the product built. So you're constantly thinking about new tools, new jigs, new processes, you know, the way things flow, you know, where work in progress happens. I mean, you can make the smallest, simplest mistakes. We had someone in the factory that built a test jig for our one of the product lines. Well, they've only got one test jig. They can't have 20. So the problem is they've only got one. Now you've just slowed the entire production line down to the speed of that one test jig. If you had 20 of them, then you'd be able to keep up. The problem is you don't, where you store 20, because then you do it for every product. And so now you've got rooms full of test jigs, and it takes time to change and bring all the test jigs in and out. And so then we find there's always work in progress stacking up because the lines are fast. There's like 20 pick and place machines on a line. It's churning products through. They're all piling up because the test station can't get them through. So your test stations need to be generic. So the simplest things can make manufacturing go horribly wrong, which is why if you really want to, you know, fix a manufacturing plant, you've got to move the CEO's office onto the factory floor. You've got to be like so intimately connected. And that's what we've lost in this country by losing manufacturing. We've lost the ability to think about how products are even created, because if you don't know manufacturing, you can't even create products. You can't just kick everything off to China or somewhere there, and you know, and you just lose all that skill. So you have to have that loop, and its whole ecosystem. It's quite complex. But I thought, how can I actually eliminate? Because that's what I'm really doing. I'm eliminating waste for an editor. Now, because we have manufacturing skill, it's like, well, we actually need to look at the editing process from a point of view of waste. Any click that doesn't do something is actually a problem. So then I started thinking in those terms, and I realized what we've got to do is everything in this interface has to do something. So instead of clicking and zooming in and doing that and then selecting the shot and then going do it, it's actually got to be quite different. It's got to be every single thing you do has to be like actually do something. So that means simple things like, and then of course one thing leads to another, and you go, okay, well, I've got this dual timeline, and I was thinking about a panel, and I've got a little panel here. There was actually a bigger full keyboard one, but this is a simpler one. In fact, if you buy the 295, was US, but if you buy the 295 Davinci Resolve Studio, actually we're bundling it with this at the moment, but we've got this nice search dial here and a bunch of controls. You know, there's a play stop and a search dial. So the other thing we were really doing is in some ways we're thinking, okay, we're building a software page, and you can use it with a mouse and keyboard. And there's interesting things with a mouse, like I'll show you quickly. Like you can double click the clip, you can scroll around, you can trim. See, everything does something. I've lost the right-hand side of my UI. Maybe it's not as good as I thought it. It is actually handling the screen. I can hit O. So you can, so if you scroll down here, trimming. But if you go in here, and the problem is if you've got a really long clip, and the clip is like, you know, 30 minutes long, like say it's a movie coming in, you want to chop some bits out of it, how do you trim? Because moving that slightly is going to cause a big movement. So you have a proportional control here. So I can actually trim by clicking on this area here. So you can see that everything does something. I mean, it's nothing like there's no click, 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 and then it does something. So that became a really interesting design constraint. Wow, everything's really jammed up on this small monitor. It's quite funny. So then I thought, okay, well, if you're doing that, we need a really good trimmer. So that's what we need to do. So we really came to the point of doing, I'll move that mouse out of the way. So what became really important is having a really good trimmer that you can just basically, you know, drag the in and out. You can sort of almost slip the in and out. You can just hit O and I, of course, if you know the keyboard shortcuts. But it became quite a good trimmer. And also we want the audio in there, because if you're jogging, you really, like if you're editing against dialogue, you might want to sort of go to that point just before the person starts talking and then put your in point there. Well, that's where it is now, but so I'm jogging. Yeah, there it is. That's that point. So, you know, I thought, you know, so we sort of worked the trimming. Then I realized if I can actually, like what we have is not just a editing interface that's really fast, it's also supports a hardware panel. The problem with normal non-linear editing, it's designed for mouse and keyboard. But we actually had really fast editing features in the old days when we had linear editing, which is all tape machines and big switches and all these edit controllers. And we've kind of lost a lot of that. So I thought, if this page is immediate and very fast, I can also essentially, it's optimized for a hardware panel. And so that means you can have like a fixed CTI on the bottom there. Oops, I've got to switch to the timeline. So you can see that CTI on the bottom there just stays still, and I can jog around. And that becomes interesting because now I've got the ability to do some things. And if I have a search dial, I can do some interesting things. I realize that if I have a search dial, I have to switch between editing and the media. If I push this media button, it can take all my media and basically lay it out. So that's the first clip. I'll scroll this a bit faster. but that's actually the next clip. I've only got 2 clips in here, but that's actually both clips there. So if I want to get some stuff, so I can actually see all my content. There's no audio on this clip actually. So I can see all my content and I can edit it down in the timeline. So I thought that was quite interesting. So if you had, you know, hundreds of clips or thousands of clips, you can just push this one button and see all of it, and it's basically scroll up and down all that media and see all that content. You can actually, if you hit the button again with an in-out point, it'll just go to that section. You can just escape to go back out. So I thought it was really nice that you can actually just see all your content. It's almost like it's done a little edit for you and put everything you've got together. Then you can scroll up and down and see it all, or jog. So I thought that was nice. But then it's sort of like one thing leads to another, and you realize, okay, but even simple things, like if I do an edit, if I'm scrolling along here and I want to get a shot, I don't actually want to switch to the timeline and do an edit. So I can put an in point in, I can put an out point, and when I hit append, it'll put it there. But that means I can just keep going. Oh yeah, I like that shot, put that down. So it doesn't even switch the timeline, because if you switch the timeline, what's the point? You know, you just want to throw shots in. But sometimes if you want to trim, you can go back. So every time we did a feature, like it led to a next feature. Okay, well, if we're going to do trimming, how do we trim shots in with a dial? And I realized I can have a bunch of buttons and use the knob. So if we hold the knob down, I can trim. So I just got these buttons on the left-hand side here, and now I can use the knob to trim. And I can go full screen and play. Don't have any audio there, but so it's really quite interesting how that development process sort of went from one thing to another. And so that's sort of, you know, what we're doing with the cut page. I mean, it's a really basic demo. I didn't really I should have probably put together a little demo. I'm just sort of discussing it, but get into some QA, because I do love talking, and I don't have any idea how long I've been talking for. So I always get super worried. But yeah, so you can sort of see that it's a very different kind of innovation process, because we were kind of going, okay, we're trying to solve a problem. We can do a bunch of things. You can even hold a button down and use the knob to resize the timeline, which is cool. And the timeline doesn't have any vertical scroll bars. As you add layers, they get smaller, unless you make it go bigger, if you can go bigger. And there's no horizontal scroll bar, because it just works. You can actually push the button there and go to a moving CTI, and a scroll bar does come up, like if you want to use it like normal editing software. And there's video only buttons and things like that. So it's quite powerful, and the combination of, so it's almost like trying to go beyond normal editing with a mouse and keyboard and saying, okay, we're bringing the control panel back, and it's a bit of a hybrid between hardware and software. But even when you're using it with a mouse, the trick is just to make the editing process super fast. So you can scroll along, throw cuts down, you know, shots into the timeline, trim them up, and then just output. And there's an output menu up the top right. We can just render it out. So really, and we've even got a thing called the sync bin, which I think will work. Yes, there it is there. So if you, on our cameras, have time codes, if you record with more than one camera, or the ATEM software, you're actually doing an ISO recording on the switcher now. That switcher will record 8 different streams. In fact, it records 9, because it records the program stream. But it'll put all those on one disk, and you can load them all in Davinci. They've all got the same time code. Now, I've only got one clip in here. But what it'll do is, if you put the wide shot down on the timeline, it'll go and find any other shot that synchronizes to that, and it'll build a multi-view, and it'll stack all the shots there, and you can just go along and decide you want to get camera 1. And I'm just holding down camera 1 with the button, and it'll just paint it into the timeline there. Now, it's actually the same shot, because it's synchronized to itself and put itself back over the top of itself. But if you had 4 cameras and they all had matching time code, you'd see the 4 cameras, and you could just put them all on the timeline, and it would basically reference them to the layer below. So they're all synchronized. It does all the work for you. So this is the kind of thing that one thing almost leads to another and leads to another. And you realize that you end up with something that's quite powerful just by really confronting problems. And you want to find problems. And in fact, you've got to push yourself to find problems. So then you think, okay, well, I've got this interesting problem. How do we solve it? And that's when the innovation comes. It's actually the process of actually fixing a problem that you don't know how to do. So we're going to rush towards things we don't actually have any idea how we're going to do them. And that's kind of exciting. In fact, we know how to do something. It means we're probably not pushing ourselves enough, because that's just implementing another version of something. Like you got to crash your bike to learn how to ride it, right? So it's a bit like that. So anyway, so I thought maybe if you want to do some Q&A, and then I can sort of focus on what people got questions about.
Now, maybe I'll start. Has anyone got a question? I'll start from the front.
Firstly, congratulations on a fantastic performance.
Thanks.
My question is very quick. How do you find time?
Yeah, well, I've been doing 2 a.m.s ever since COVID started. I write a lot of code, and the code runs the company. So in some ways, most of my time's focused on, well, and when I'm not writing code because there's so much changing, which is why I've been doing it. But a lot of, my feeling is if the company, like no one's ever really taken manufacturing skill and actually applied it to management of companies either. So everyone just gets caught up in all this crazy stuff. The other problem is capitalism. Everyone thinks that the world is capitalist. It's not actually. To me, capitalism and communism are the same thing because the results are the same. So everyone keeps having these money-centric views. I mean, you want to make money, obviously you've got to be financially successful, but capitalism seems like a different thing. It seems like the money is actually ruling everything. That's a whole different thing. And so what you end up getting is dysfunction because you're getting an ideology driving you, which then has a whole lot of problems because ideologies never actually, like the world's naturally complex. Ideologies are a way of simplifying things, but in fact, it never works. So then you add a whole lot of artificial complexity to try and manage it. So if you don't do any of that stuff, it's surprising how much time you do have. And plus, building products is exciting and thinking these things through. And you can do this. I mean, half this stuff, I mean, I thought of the keyboard while I was driving up to Sydney with the kids, and the family for Christmas. We hired a camper van, never do it. It's horrible. It was like it was hot and it was awful and you can't park anywhere and everyone hates you. And it's just like, I just drove back in the end. It was awful. But it was an interesting experience because now I know not to do that ever again, which is always good. But I was just thinking about this noisy. I mean, of course, I reinvented how to do a caravan. It should be electric and the generator should be in the back and it should run electric and the generator can power that. So it's kind of hybrid, but it's got enough battery power to run the aircon all night. That'd be really cool. And you could creep in quietly to campsites and so you won't get stabbed or anything. And so I was thinking of that and I was simultaneously also thinking about the editing problems. So you tend to find that you spend all your time thinking about some of these product challenges. And also we've got a massive number of really smart people. Like we've got actually 1,800 now. And so, there's going to be like anything you have a problem with, you just like go into the office and go, okay, I think this might be how to do something. And you just sort of go and, hey, you talk to people and we've got a cafe and people hang out and talk and you're going to work it out. So I think the great thing about having a bunch of like being financially successful and having a bunch of really good engineering people and designers and all that is that you don't really feel like you got the confidence to try anything because in fact, the natural state is not to know what the solution is. And there's enough smart people around to help you get through it. So then you just crash into it and you're doing it all the time. You're thinking about this stuff all the time, even though you maybe at work for only a set sort of time. So it's not like, I mean, COVID changed a lot. I have been doing 2 a.m. and because there's just so much changing. And so we've got an opportunity with the sales being the way they are and things getting shut down and starting back up again and all this kind of stuff to how do you ever get that data set again? So if you do some code to handle that, then you've kind of got that in the future. And if you get into that situation ever again, that code will kick in and sort of handle these situations. So it's kind of an interesting point of view, from that point of view. But I think the more stuff you do, you don't like your brain doesn't get full. The more stuff you do, the more experiences you have, and that's kind of exciting. So you kind of it's like those dudes who jump off mountains, except the kind of fat person's version of it. And it's kind of a product-based thing. So it's a complex. It's a good question. I don't quite know the answer to it, but it's like I don't have to work long, but actually I kind of am. Oh, well. So it's kind of a yes-no answer. So sorry if sort of the answer.
Lloyd's got a question.
Thanks, Grant. You obviously come from a different background, more of the technical background. So you had the attitude of put a CEO on the manufacturing floor and you'll solve the problems. My experience is put a CEO in a manufacturing floor and you'll create a disaster.
You got the wrong CEO.
Most CEOs of manufacturing companies don't come from the
exactly.
trade and the skill and the manufacturing base. They come from finance and legal.
And this is the fundamental problem we have is that everyone thinks we're capitalists. So what do? The problem with that is you put these people in charge that know spreadsheets and numbers. Like the way I think about it, there's 3 types of complacency. The first type of complacency, because you want good quality decisions. How do you make good quality decisions? Well, quality of decisions is actually fundamental to everything you do. You want every decision to be a good quality decision. None of these people that screw the world up are dumb. They don't go to work wanting to do a bad job. They go to work wanting to do a good job. That's their understanding of the world that must be flawed. So if you see dysfunction, but they're smart people who are trying to do their best, and we've seen a lot of dysfunction with COVID, for example, then I think the question is, well, how does that dysfunction manifest itself? Why does it happen? So why do some people do good decisions? Some people make bad decisions. So I sort of thought about it in simplified down to something core, particularly too, is when I think about some of these things, okay, well, this idea that I've got about how the world works still be valid in 100 years' time, because if it isn't, then it's probably too connected to some kind of social or technical thing now. So it's not deep enough. We don't change. We're the same people we were 100 years ago. So the big question then becomes is just because we've got a lot of gadgets doesn't mean to say we're different people. We still make the same mistakes. So I thought one of the things is there's three types of complacencies. The first one is really just laziness. It's people that just are complacent. They don't really care. They've got no competition or work in government maybe sometimes, or they're at the airport check-in counter, or those horrible immigration people. Doesn't matter how good a show we've had. The minute I get back to Australia, I know exactly where I stand because they're just awful. But the computers are really friendly, so I just try to go through the electronic thing because they seem really friendly and nice. So, I just want to cuddle the computer and say thank you, you didn't insult me and make me feel bad. So, I'm just hugging the computer in the airport, and that probably makes them worry. But the second type of complacency is actually ideology. It's people who it's obviously communism, capitalism, all these weird things. It's actually we had separation of church and state in a world that did that were actually deeply religious. Why would a bunch of really deeply religious people have separation of church and state? They did it because they wanted a scientific-based government, not an ideologically-based government. And what we have now is political parties that are ideologies. We have business culture. We have all kinds of cultures that are still dominant. And people talk about their cultures as, oh, my culture is this. I don't care about your culture because anything you do from a culture is actually a complacency. You're not thinking, you're just acting like other people do. And you see it all the time. Like, how many people try to get into business and act like a business person? They start trying to talk like that. I've seen engineers do it. Like, dude, you're an engineer. Use your strengths to your advantage. Don't try and be something you're not, because you're going to not be as good as what other business people are. And they're captured by a business culture. So they're just acting in a culture. But the third type of complacency is the really vicious one. This is the one that actually, best in case, I mean, you think about it, what the third type of complacency is metrics. It's people who use data and spreadsheets, but that's a simplistic version. The real problem is all your skill, all your experience, all your contacts, all your knowledge, all your education, every book you have is a massive complacency because it constrains your thought. And that's why nature is going to kill us all, because nature knows it doesn't stuff around, it just gets rid of us all. And then new kids come along, they learn new ways, and there's flaws in the way they learn because they're arrogant. That's what kids are supposed to be. And they end up reinventing at a very cultural, knowledge-based level. So we don't have to wait for genetic variation. We can actually do it literally in the knowledge that, that we have as a species. So that is a really interesting thing, because the best case business practice is the customer feedback loop, it's metrics, it's reports, it's all that stuff. But the problem is you can only measure what's happened in the past. So you can't measure, you can imagine what happens in the future, but you can't actually measure it. You can interpolate it, but you can't really know. There's no data, which is why Australia screwed up the launch of the COVID, but Singapore didn't, because they'd already seen SARS. They already had experience, but there was no difference in the quality of the people. It's just the fact that Singapore had actually experienced it before, so they had a plan in place. So when COVID kicked off in February, we started doing all the processes that we just basically got the Singapore documents, and we used them because they were starting to go into pandemic mode, whereas Australia was still drifting along, hoping that it would all go away or it wouldn't come in. And of course it did. And then when they did kick in, they went way overboard on lockdowns and stuff. I mean, some of that was ridiculous. You don't go into a pregnant woman's house and arrest her. It's just stupid. You expect the police to be wise, and we always thought they would be. So while the results been pretty good, I think that, but that's the kind of behavior. It's not that anyone's really bad. We're always looking for a bad person. The problem is it's just the fact that being like that. So what you have is government departments that get really skilled, complex. I mean, the complex economy, it's getting more complex all the time. And you get a bunch of really skilled people, very clever people, very well educated. But then what happens is something goes wrong and they just don't have experience in it. And so, that's why the military do a lot of training all the time. And if they're good at training, they do a lot of crazy things and do all sorts of stuff, because they're trying to create lots of situations where they can experience something, because they don't have time to think it through when it actually happens. But that's why skilled people will often make better decisions. But skilled people are busy doing the job. That's how they get skilled. They don't look good. And we're living in a capitalist sort of thing. What you get is people who look good, who are money managers, and they just look the right style, and they rely on data. So they're not wrong. And that's the problem. These people that are sort of those MBA types, for example, they're not really wrong. You can't say that they're wrong. And that's the problem. You can't say they're wrong, but they're not right either. Now they can manage assets, because, really asset management is just assets. You don't have to create anything. But for creative industries, it's a big problem. That's why the industrial base has been wiped out in this country, because China's not capitalist. They're not really communist, either kind of communist government. They're not actually capitalist. There's something else. And what they are is what we try to be, which is creative. So capital's an important part of it. Social stuff's an important part of it, but you can't be the ideology. You've got to be thinking, and the world is naturally complex. You've got to manage that, and you've got to respond to that. And so, of course, the end game on all this is that you get a bunch of people that don't really know what they're doing, but they look good. They're using data to look good. Then something happens, or they start to look embarrassed because it all becomes about looking good. The data pops up occasionally and shows something bad, like inflation figures or unemployment. So then they go, oh, well, I can't falsify the data because that's just corrupt. So what I'll do is I'll make the data more divided. So we have like, how many different types of inflation are there? The unemployment figure, it's like people looking for work versus people not. It's like, how come it used to just be a number? But the numbers start to embarrass. So then they start breaking the numbers down into lots of different subcategories. And then no one actually knows what's gone wrong. So when you get anything go wrong, it's not an honest process of evaluating, going, okay, let's have some real blunt discussions here. Let's work out where things went wrong. You don't even know what went wrong because there's so much data in so many divided up different ways that you can't actually see what's wrong. And then no one gets blamed. So you have a bunch of people in power that have absolutely no ability to get in at faulted. And it just becomes this sort of multi-complex dysfunction that is professional in the way it's being done. But what ends up happening is everyone gets angry and goes, screw all you idiots, you experts don't know anything. And then they just default back to an ideology. So the problem is you have to go beyond that. And so I think that's something, I've got to debate this out with people that kind of know more about this, but that's roughly why manufacturing died here. And it won't come back unless we do something significant. Like I thought that we could actually, in some ways, rescue it from the country out. Got a lot of space out there and a lot of sunlight. We could put free solar farms in, give the power to country towns. People will try and game the system by putting batteries in so they can use it at nighttime when there's, and so that's what you actually want. But, you know, they're spending a lot of money just by shoveling it out to people. So, well, I wouldn't just buy stuff and put it in. You could actually reinvent the country areas where they could you could have a lot of solar power. It would be free, and then industries would pop up and people go, well, maybe I'll move there because I can get all the power for free during the day and that might be good. And the ecosystem will drift in the right way. So, yeah, there's lots of interesting ideas, but that's sort of somehow how things go wrong. Smart people that mean well, they're very well educated, just balls it all up. And it's because of this. And that's why I think great societies rise and they fall. This is how they fall. Everybody talks about how societies rise and fall. The number of times I see some guy on YouTube who's trying to predict the future by looking at movements. Oh, well, we've had 3 movements like that. So that means, well, it's like, no, that doesn't mean anything. If you look at the people and what are their motivations? And that's why economists scare me because they aggregate behavior. Whereas one person can actually, like we've done $3.2 billion into the country. That was just something I started and a whole bunch of people come along for the journey. One person in democracy can make an amazing impact. So we just go out there and do that. So sorry, that's a long-winded, it's a good question, but a very long-winded sort of answer, but hopefully it covers a bunch of stuff.
I might get you to help me with the edit as well.
Yes, yeah.
I think we'll go away from tonight saying, wow, isn't that amazing? But if we've absorbed 1%, that'll be impressive.
I think there'll be probably an edit, so you'll hopefully be okay.
But
hopefully some audio, that'd be great. I don't want to jinx it.
So thank you for a great presentation.
No worries.
But I just want to come back to one simple question.
Yep.
When it goes to capitalism, I was eating my muesli a few weeks ago, and I was reading that old-fashioned thing called a newspaper, and it had advertisement by Davinci.
Oh, yeah.
You can get all this stuff for $2.95.
Yep.
Well, I don't need it, but how can you employ 1,800 people around the world and give this fantastic stuff away for $2.95?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, scale is important. Like if you've got a lot of people, then you're actually selling a lot, so it covers it. But my thinking is what we do in a very fundamental is creative freedom. Like that's what we're giving to our customers. That's what we always did. And that's what we've always tried to do. So if it's very fundamental to what you do, and in fact, you know, you hear these people go, oh, you should have a purpose statement, I think it is, or it used to be a mission statement, whatever the hell that is. Yeah. If you actually want to do that and doesn't have the word freedom in it, then get out of the business. I don't know what the mission statement for the casino is. You know, like, I mean, sure, it's an entertainment district, and I actually ate lunch there. We went out with some people for lunch because we don't get out much. We're like, hey, let's go out. So we ate lunch there. But in reality, if you got freedom, I mean, we all know what it was like to get a car. We all know what it was like to go to the movies by yourself when you moved out of home, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really important. So everything about what we do, every decision we make is about freedom. So then you look at it and go, well, I can't do a software cloud license arrangement for Davinci where I'm charging everyone every month, because the more people use it, the more they're getting trapped. So they've got to keep paying you, because otherwise all their projects shut down and they can't use any of their work. And this is their work. It's not like maybe it's a game or something, and if you don't have access to it, you don't play the game. You've actually built work in it, and if you limited that labor, and that's on your disk, it's your work. You should always have access to that. So I didn't like that cloud model. So we charged a low amount for it, but then I realized what I need to do is if I make it free, it's a different business model essentially, and it's still, money centric. I mean, just because I'm saying it's not really capitalism, it means the money doesn't rule. It's just part of a mix. I mean, money's a tool, like everything else. So my thinking is that if you make it free, then people can get into it really easily. So a student can use it, or a freelance guy could use it who doesn't get any work for 2 months, and then he gets a job. Or a car salesman could use it, and he can do a really nice car videos, but then he might be busy for a couple of months. He doesn't have to keep paying for it. He just comes back to it when he's ready. A lot of people don't. Like, I only edit on it every couple of months. So I use it intensely for 2 days, and then I don't use it for a couple of months. That's how a lot of people do things. So I thought if it's free, then you can just use it whenever you want to. It's on there all the time. All your projects are there. But if you do want to, like, you know, we've obviously got a bunch of really difficult IP. There's all sorts of AI stuff and things like that. Like, for instance, our lens flare filter actually simulates various cinema lenses. It's not just a circles with color. It's actually literally emulating the optical effects of lenses. So, I mean, it's really intense. So, yeah, we put that stuff in the paid version, but that's $2.95. But scale gives us enough money from that. But what's really interesting about that is that then, okay, well, if you start making money and you become financially successful, then you can buy that. So we actually have to find a way to make you profitable. Like, we've got to get Davinci to you in a free version that's good enough that you can actually make some money off it. If you make some money off it, then you'll buy that paid version and we'll get a kickback. And a lot of people probably pay the paid version just to thank us. They don't really need it. They're just buying it because, like, oh, it's good to have it. And if I want to use some feature and it's there, it'll be available. But I just want to say thank you to Blackmagic. I know that's what they're doing because I've done that to companies, right? So you know that that's part of it. Is people just buying it because they want to thank us for doing it. But then there's color panels and edit panels and other things around the ecosystem, even cameras in some ways. So it does become a core of an ecosystem as well. So that also extends it through various hardware products. But really, I think that's really good because if you look at the cloud-based software licensing, once you've got them on a cloud, what you now have is a bunch of engineers who don't actually have to do anything to get you to buy an upgrade. They just will keep making money. So what happens, right? So there's a lot of engineers out of Silicon Valley that are all activists now. They're all getting caught up in all kinds of causes and stuff. It's like, dude, the software quality is suffering. You've got to get focused on quality, but they don't have to because you don't have to buy the upgrade. So there's no, like, when we first acquired Davinci, it had, you could pay, I think it was like $14,000 for a spare board for their big hardware system. And if you paid for their, the support plan for a year, it became like $4,500 or whatever. It's just like, screw all that shit. Let's just give everyone the $4,500 price. Because the problem is they weren't actually focused on quality because they're making money off faults. So the support plans can be good in some situations, and cloud licenses can be good in some situations. You've got a really expensive software, small market, that makes it more affordable for a business to afford it. It's not a big one-off cost. But man, it can also have a really negative point. And you can have a bunch of engineers who just don't care about trying to get you to buy an upgrade because you're locked in. And so you're being trapped the more you use a product. It's being used against you. Whereas Davinci's business model has to be compatible with freedom. I've got to give people creative freedom, and I've got to find other ways of making more money. If I wanted to, I can make a quick dollar, but if I can give it to you for free, then when you make money, I've got to find ways of giving you features that make you successful. Because no creative person, and probably a lot of you guys as well, you don't think, oh, I want to be a business person. I mean, there are people like that. You met them when you're a teenager and they were kind of annoying, you know? But, you know, oh, I'm going to be a business person. Really? Great, you know? They do something creative or they do something and then they find that people kind of want some of it. Can you do my wedding or can you do my corporate videos or whatever? And you start to find, hey, actually, I've got some money coming in. Oh, I've got a better business. I didn't realize they're going to have a business. They just sort of wound up making some money. And so that's how a lot of people get into business. I got into it that way. I started making this product and you had to sell them to afford parts. And then you go, hey, this is all cycling now. Hey, it's a business. So that's how a lot of people get into the good people, the people we want, actually get into it like that. So if we can give it to them for free and they start to use it, they start to do work on it, they do work for friends, or they start getting other people recommending each other. And before you know it, they're the guy that does those kinds of videos. Now they've got a business. And then hopefully they can come back to us. So I've got to find ways of making it financially successful. That's how business Davinci works. All those engineers are working to make the people who use it financially successful and be able to support themselves doing the thing that they seem to enjoy, which is actually using the tool. And that's a much better business model because it's compatible with freedom, which is a very fundamental thing. We're not like all the other manufacturers in video. We were customers. We worked at post houses, and I'm out of my mind with frustration about the manufacturers. They're all incentivized by commission. We don't have commission for any of our guys. So when you talk to one of our guys in a trade show, you just get an honest answer. He's not trying to sell you something. So it's a fundamental cultural shift is what we actually try to do. And this Davinci is really part of that. So it's a bit of a long-winded question, but it's actually a really good question because it's a large chunk of kind of culture that is the answer.
Grant, look, we've run over time a bit.
Sorry.
No,
I do love
that's fine.
talking.
I think if you've got to unwind all your gear. If anyone wants to ask Grant a question, maybe they do it, when we have a break in a few minutes. So thanks very much.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks.
thanks very much, Grant. I found it interesting. I'm amazed at technology nowadays. A few people here know that I lost my job through technology, so I'm not very happy with it. You talked about cameras and lenses. I'm struggling with my box brownie. So, you know, some of this is just way over my head. But just on behalf of the club, I'm afraid it's not chilled. I believe you don't drink red wine at chilled. You drink it at room temperature. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're a bit behind schedule, but not to worry. But I just want to tell you about a teacher at school placed 4 worms in 4 separate test tubes. The first test tube had beer in it, the second test tube had wine, the third had whiskey, and the fourth had mineral water. The next day, the teacher shows the results to the students. The first worm in beer, dead. The second worm in wine, dead. The third worm in whiskey, dead. The fourth in mineral water, alive and healthy. The teacher then asks the class, "What do we learn from this experience?" And a child responds, "Whoever drinks beer, wine and whiskey does not have worms." So now I'd like to introduce our President, David Stonia Gibson, and he's going to have a few words.
Okay, I'm going to be doing 2 things. One is a little bit of an update on what's happening around the club, and the other is to run the special general meeting after that. So we'll try and get through it fairly quickly. Just really a few updates on things that are going on. You will notice that the internet lounge has now been dismantled. You're not hearing me? Is that better? Oh, okay, rightio. Sorry about that. The internet lounge has been somewhat reconfigured, shall we say. We're trying to make that into a more social area. The equipment that was in there, and I've sent a notice around about this. The equipment that was in there has all been set aside, and we've sent a notice around, and we'll be reminding another couple of times. If there's any of the facilities that were in there that you need to or would like us to keep, then let us know with those notices, or forever hold on peace, because we do need to clean up and declutter the place quite a lot. So far, from the first notice I sent out, just for your interest, 9 of the responses were please keep so-and-so equipment, mainly the video translation equipment, but 1 or 2 other items. And I've had, that's 9, yes, please keep stuff, and 16 people who basically just wrote and said, thanks for keeping us up to date, but I don't use any of that stuff. So that's where we are on that. Big event coming up on Sunday the 18th, which is Sunday week. We're going to have a party, and I'm calling it the COVID Be Gone party. And hopefully COVID will be gone as far as we're concerned. If anything changes, well, we might have to cancel parties. So it's going to be here. It's simply going to be social. It's going to be hopefully a lot of fun. We're laying on pizza and something cold to drink, maybe light beer even. It'll be free. So we want as many people, both from in the room here and you guys at home, to come along at 11 o'clock on Sunday the 18th. Again, I'll be sending out notices by that and pestering you with emails on that one. Look, we might have to say if a non-member wants to come along, they have to pay a fee. Otherwise, it becomes a little unfair. Yeah. Well, I've listed here the Borrett room arrangement, but you can see for yourself that the Borrett room has been reconfigured quite a bit. There's a lot of old junk behind the petitions up there, which we hid away, and we'll be working on that over the next few weeks. That's mainly the stuff from the Internet Lounge. So this is still very much a work in progress. I want to say a very special thanks to one person, and that's Kirsten. Just stand up for a moment, Kirsten. Yeah. Kirsten has really risen to the occasion with organizing these meetings. She puts a lot of effort into it. We don't always see 101% eye to eye, but we get through that because, you know, we all, at the end of the day, have the same objectives in mind. And I think this meeting here has been very successful, fantastic speaker. And yeah. Oh, yeah, no, there are other people. Kirsten. Yeah.
I'll just say that Kirsten was the one who was in touch with the States.
Yeah.
In this organised.
Yes.
At very early hours in the morning. So.
Yeah. And look, with one of the things I'm learning is that functions like that, they really need to be as much as possible channeled through a single person. Because if you have too many cooks in different kitchens around the countryside, you're going to wind up with you know, things going wrong and things not being coordinated. So it's actually quite important. I'm learning, even at my age, I'm still learning on the job. Okay, just very briefly, my vision for this space, these club rooms, is essentially that when a potential new member comes into the club rooms, they're going to look around and they're going to say, wow. What that means is that we are, or my ambition certainly is to try and have this place loaded up with things that will attract the eye and impress and look really, really cool for young and for not so young. But I have to say largely for young, because that's where our future membership lies, is the young people. So I want lots of flashing lights and stuff. If anyone has got any ideas for something maybe they can do and contribute, it might be a video game but a cool video game, not something tired and old fashioned, and willing to help out, I'd love to know about it. Okay, that's that briefly. You will have noticed that the training room is now the maker room. And that is still very much a work in progress. We have found just from direct experience that the dynamics of it has not worked perfectly. So we will tune that up as we go along. There's a lot of tools in there. So you can go in there and you can now build a fairly substantial electronics project in that room. And I'm going to be looking at a spaghetti cooker, I think it was, so we can do surface mount soldering. Yeah, at the moment, everything we have is for through-hole plated boards, basically. A little bit of sad news. We've lost one SIG. The Bayside SIG has closed down. What was the sort of final straw for them, just other than COVID, is that the church hall that they use, the people in charge there have reconfigured the space, and it just doesn't work for that SIG anymore. And so some of the equipment from the Bayside SIG has come back here to Moorabbin. And of course, all those people from that SIG are very welcome to take part in activities here. So I just want to thank Peter Carpenter, wherever he is, whether he's in here or out of online somewhere. Peter, thank you for everything you've done, and all the other people that have been running that SIG. And finally, I just want to float one idea. And it sort of, actually, the idea came before this idea of the COVID Be Gone party, of us having daytime monthly meetings where we get together maybe on a Sunday when those of the more advanced seniority are comfortable driving. A lot of us now are not too cool with driving at night. And we come together, and not the sort of formal structured meeting that we have for these Wednesday nights maybe, but something a little more lighthearted and social. I think social is important, and particularly coming out of COVID. So any comments about that, you can, that idea, ideas for things we can do in those meetings would be welcome. Just send me an email, president@MelbPC. So that's it for my president's kind of report. So now we're going to run the special general meeting. This is for, well, actually, I'm going to hand over to Dave Botherway to actually run the meeting. So I think, Dave, over to you. Yeah, thanks. You probably have your own quick.
The purpose of the special general meeting is to consider a motion that Harry Lewis be made an honorary life member for his contribution to the Melbourne PC user group. The motion per se is nominated, the mover of that motion is myself, Dave Botherway, the seconder, George Scarbeck. In terms of the background to it, the criteria to be considered for an honorary life member is 10 years or more of outstanding contribution across multiple roles within Melbourne PC. In Harry's case, he joined MelbPC in 2004 and has been a committee member for 7 years, serving as president for 2 terms. He's been on the iHelp team for 10 years and was the iHelp team convener for 1 year. He supported the migration of members' email from our in-house system to Microsoft Outlook, which was back in 2013 and 14. He contributed to the next migration from Outlook.com to Office 365 Enterprise and is currently assisting the transition team from Microsoft Mail and products to G Suite, and quite a few of you have hopefully been involved or will be involved with that. He's been a Civi CRM administrator for 3 years and was charged with validating member data migrated from our legacy system, MMS. Continues to assist with the account management for Office and Microsoft 365 and for the CRM membership database. He's also been a proofreader for PC Update for 2 years. With that background, we certainly feels Harry easily meets the criteria that we previously established, at least 10 years of service across multiple roles. Now, you want to declare the result then? In terms of the voting, the notice of the motion said it had to be done by proxy, and the president has got the results for us.
We received the last few proxy votes today on paper, but the vote so far is 54 for and 1 against. So we have met the requirement for a quorum, so the motion is carried. If anyone else wants to vote on that now who hasn't already voted, you're welcome to put your hand up. Wow, okay. Are we going to count that? I'm going to call that another 20, yeah. So that's a pretty good vote. Okay.
Congratulations, Harry, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Now, if Harry's online somewhere, we've given you the opportunity for 2 minutes to respond to that motion. Come on in, Harry.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, I'm just starting my video. First of all, I have to say, well, thank you, Mr. President,
soon for part of the
and Dave. Are you hearing me? Am I coming through? Am I audible? Is Colin saying yes? Good, thank you, Colin. First of all, my thanks to the nominating committee, the Melbourne PC committee, and to all of those who voted in this special general meeting for the motion. I feel like a certain recently appointed female member of Senate, and I'd like to meet with the other one. I appreciate also that special measures were required.
This guy's at the doctor and said, "Doc, when am I going to get the COVID injection?" He said, "Why are you asking me? I'm only a doctor. Ask a politician."
Thank you, George. I did want to mention my appreciation of the special efforts that had to be put in to arrange the SGM. A couple of points. Dave mentioned my committee experience. Against that background, I want to say that MelbPC has been extremely fortunate in its officers and committee over the past 4+ years since a certain change, with vital contributions both from some very long-serving members, including several honorary life members, and also from recent, and among them some refreshingly younger members who give promise of an interesting future for the club. By now, I've been involved in 3 changes in our email service. Always, this has been in company with other members who have provided vital support. I particularly would mention the team of volunteers who came to our assistance in early 2014 when we suffered an interruption of service because of failure of our email servers. To receive their mail again, members had to activate their new accounts, and the team set to work contacting hundreds of members. The current transition to Google hosting is also very much a team job, with several volunteers playing key roles, each of them irreplaceable. Finally, in the context of my work with iHelp and with members over the email changes, it has been a great pleasure to meet so many members in the course of supporting them. I am continually impressed by the friendliness of members and by the great variety of backgrounds and experience which they bring to MelbPC. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're very welcome, Harry. And by that, I declare the special general meeting closed.
Thanks very much, David, and congratulations, Harry. I don't know about that friendly bit. Harry had trouble with me, and he was very patient to deal with me. David mentioned Kirsten, and Kirsten, you want to say a few words? Can I just, while Kirsten's getting here, endorse what David said? She spends a lot of time on the phone with me trying to sort me out, and I'm sure she must do it to lots of other people. So well done, Kirsten. You put in an awful lot of time, and you're certainly a great help to me. She's looking for her notes.
Oh, well, it's a real pleasure and a privilege to be organising these meetings. And I wanted to give a shout out to Nico Callahan, who's joined our AV team for a little while to, we put an ad in Seek so that we could get some young volunteers joining in. And so I just think that's wonderful. Because one of the things that Grant actually said in one of his interviews was if you want to find, you know, someone asked, what should young people do? Grant, tell me if I've got this wrong, but he said, look at the old people, figure out which ones are happy and copy them. We've got some really good things coming up, and I want to also shout out to Bruce Howell, who, because I'm a bit of an introvert, comfortable coding. And I think a lot of people in our club sort of are, and yet they have got fantastic ideas. And one such idea was John Hall with Grant, but Bruce Howell has come up with some aviation themes for next month. We have Adrienne Fleming, who is one of the 4% of women pilots in Australia. And she's going to talk, she's like in a gazillion different not-for-profits and committees and things. And also Chris and the Australian Air League, and I left my glasses on the other in my bag. Chris Hodges, and he will be also talking about a program called Fly Sim, which is about how they train the young people 8 years plus in the Australian Air League. So we've got a very aviation theme next month, and so we'll be welcoming George as MC, and also to show his video properly this time. And thank you. Peter will also be here with his aviation experience. So thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. And I apologise to Kirsten, Stephen and Hugh that I've mucked up my agenda. Kirsten goes to a lot of bother to put this together. But I'd now like to introduce Stephen Zwarger, our Vice President, and Hugh McDonald, who are going to give us a small presentation.
So this is, I guess, a bit of a different format from what often happens at the monthly meetings. Hugh and I actually sort of did this format. Some of you may remember we were having a chat about our photography. So this is that similar format, but we're going to chat about cybersecurity. If you've got any questions that our discussion is making you think about, feel free to put your hand up, and I think we've got some microphone rovers to help with that. And also, this is a specific point to the people that are coming in through Zoom. We've got Stuart off to the side here, and he's watching the chat, the instant message chat, not listening to the audio. But if you've got any questions and you type those questions in, Stuart will also be using one of the mics to throw a question or a comment to us. So yeah, we want to specifically also, include you people who are listening to us through the internet. I don't know, would you have anything else to say, or should we just start talking about how to avoid bad things happening to you on the internet?
Yeah, I think let's get into security tips for
Okay.
PC.
Yeah, and I suppose to give a bit of background for those of you here who don't know us, we both work in IT. We work, I suppose, in a mix of consumer and corporate IT. We're trying to keep the discussion consumer focused and not technical. So hopefully it's relevant to you. So I suppose the first thing is, like, when we've got all these passwords, you've got password to your Gmail or your Facebook or your bank or whatever it is, there's all these different passwords to remember. And, it can be tempting to have a weak password because that's easier, but that's also a risk. And so the first one is the password safe.
Yeah, that's right. So, what do you use for your password safe, or what's your approach?
Well, my approach is to use a password safe, which is not Notepad, it's not Excel, it's not a little paper booklet that I hide somewhere in my house. I use a free piece of software called KeePass. There's many other pieces of software, so if you've got one that you already know about, or someone that whose view you respect recommends this, I suppose they all do. It's like a lock, I guess. If the padlock is a good padlock, they all do the same thing. There's a shackle, it comes down, it stays shut, and the key is your ability to secure it. So they're all, reasonably good. Some of them do get, people test for vulnerabilities. So if you see some news that password safe has been compromised, take that seriously. But everything can be compromised. If it was built by a human, it can be compromised by a human. But I think having a password safe, and I'm just reflecting on, I guess, the behavior of it, I don't feel tempted to simplify my passwords, and I don't have to go through that, speaking to myself going, oh, gee, I can't be bothered having a good, robust password that's difficult to guess, because my password safe is going to remember it for me. And I think that they stop us taking lazy shortcuts, which can then present a security risk. I think personally, that's my favorite thing. It stops me from being a weak human in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you, I use one as well. I've used LastPass for many years.
Yep.
Yep. Recently, LastPass used to be free. You can use it on any device. Just in the last month or so, they've limited it to one type of device. So you can either use it on a mobile or you can use it on a PC. So I've switched recently to Microsoft make one called Microsoft Authenticator, and they're starting to build that up. So so that's a tip for you as well if you've been using LastPass or you've been tempted to use a password safe, and you want one that syncs across all your devices, your mobile and your PC and your tablet or whatever. Microsoft Authenticator is the way to go there. But yeah, like you, LastPass is the way to go. I've seen a lot of poor practices in my career, like you say, exercise books, diaries, Excel spreadsheets, post-it notes, or just people that use the same password for everything.
Can I have my audio back? We've also got some questions as well, or some. Peter, if we can get some of these questions.
Yeah.
It's my mic.
Can you turn my gain down, please, and leave it once you've done that?
Go ahead with your question.
Oh, it's probably, no, it's a small audience.
No, we need it to go out. This mic isn't working. Turn it on. It's turned on. 1, 2, 3.
Is Stuart's mic working?
We'll relay your question.
Yeah.
So just tell us your question, we'll relay it.
Why don't you just describe how a password safe works?
Okay.
Just repeat the question.
So the question was, how does a password safe work?
Yep.
The very simplest way would probably be, imagine an Excel spreadsheet that was inherently always locked. So you'd need a password to unlock it. And so if you had the file there and you save, your password safe file, if we can just not change the microphone gain, that'd be really helpful. A password safe is basically just a program where I suppose it's like an address book. You're saving someone's address, their name, and all the different values that relate to that person. But instead of it being a person, it's a resource. It could be your bank account. It could be your government-related credentials, whatever it is. And it just allows you to search. I want to get my NAB credentials, my ING, my ATO, whatever they are, and you can view the username and you can view the password. But when you close it, it's secured and it can't be re-accessed unless you put the password in.
Yeah, so think of it kind of like a virtual bank vault. Like you know the combination of the bank vault, and everything that's secure for you, you put in that bank vault, and then whenever you want to access anything, you put in that combination, and everything opens up inside the bank vault. John.
Peter, John's got a. We'll relay your question, John. Yeah.
Can I do that? Can I add to the explanations, because I use them and I love them. They save time. These people who fluff around and get wrong passwords, get a password safe, they save time. And to add to the explanation of how you use them, as Stephen said, it's like a giant spreadsheet, which is protected by encryption, and you copy and paste the username and passwords out of that into the login username and password of the site that you're going to. So that's incredibly fast. You don't even know that you're pasting a 20-character password. Very secure. It saves time.
Get one. David.
Maybe you come up here, David. This works.
I've noticed that some of the financial websites or financial logins don't allow you to paste in them. You have to actually type the password in. What do you do?
That is true, yeah. It's just that extra bit of security, isn't it? So.
You've got 20 or so.
But even if you have a password safe, you can open it up and you can look at what your password is and at least type it in. So it's still more much more secure than having an Excel spreadsheet or remembering it.
Yeah. it's interesting actually, if we think of, let's say banking, I think, I'd add another comment, I think that they do that to not encourage you to do things like copying and pasting. I think there's a lot, so I think it would be fair to say that security and the good guys side of security is certainly mature enough where they know where it's a good idea to discourage a person from doing something that's a poor practice. So a lot of times they will do that to make sure that you don't get yourself into bad habits. Another thing with the internet banking, some of you might have heard of two-factor, multi-factor, 2FA, MFA. These are all acronyms that mean a similar sort of thing. This is where you might try and log into your internet banking and you get an SMS. You've got to type in a 6-digit number into your internet banking to complete a transaction. So the idea is your username and password is something that you know, and the multiple, the second factor is something that you have. You have a mobile phone, you can receive an SMS, or it could be, as you've said, it could be Microsoft Authenticator, or it could be, you know, some of you may have seen those RSA tokens that have been around for 10 or 15 years, and they'll get a 6-digit number that will expire every 60 seconds. So that's another, you know, where you have an additional factor. So that's really cheap and easy to do, and you can do it with lots of different free software options that you can put on your smartphone. So I'd say if you have the option to use multi-factor, do use it, because if someone compromises your password, they also have to compromise your mobile phone or steal your device, or, you know, somehow change your mobile phone account to their stolen SIM card. And that's a lot harder for them to execute that. So it's inherently not worth the hassle.
Yeah. Tom's got a question.
Yeah. Perhaps you can repeat it.
Yeah, sure.
One of the banks that I am customer of has a free factor. In other words, take what you said, plus if it is not an account, a transfer to a done before, if you haven't done the transfer to the same person previously, it will send you an email to tell you this is the first time that you paid someone. If it's not you, ring up a number. And so that's the first one. But what I want to ask you, if I may, is this password safe, you know, there are a few of them around. What stops some smart individual to crack them if it's stored outside your system?
So, well, yeah, so the question is, what stops an individual from hacking into a password safe? Do you have something you want to add there?
Well, you know how I made the comment earlier that password safes avoid you being a lazy person and having shortcuts and weak passwords? You need one strong password on your password safe, because a weak password is the easiest way for someone to break in. They'll just use a method called brute force, which is just guessing until the right password is accepted. So, look, nothing is totally perfect and impenetrable. This is why there's probably two. I'm sort of thinking about how to come back to your question. You need to have a strong password for your password safe. There's no way around it. Like, make sure that the key on the front door of your house is a good quality key that's difficult to pick. Then also, if when you're choosing whatever password safe product you're going to use, what I'd suggest is just, if you hear about any vulnerabilities for that product, take them seriously. It's just like if we hear about, a public health emergency such as COVID-19, eventually we've had a massive change to the way that we behave. So pay attention and take your own cybersecurity take your own cybersecurity seriously, and subscribe to the updates. And I guess this is where, subscribing to this stuff could become very technical. But as a consumer who's interested in making sure that they stay cyber secure, there's plenty of ways where you can get accessible, consumer-friendly information to the question of, is my product that I'm using still considered secure, or are there any known vulnerabilities or recently discovered vulnerabilities? But having a strong, you do need to have a good, strong password. Good and strong, they're a bit subjective, aren't they? 8 to 10 characters with different case variations, you know, using special characters. Don't use words, don't just use basic number substitution. Create passphrases or an acronym. Think of a phrase in your head, turn it into an acronym, change things around within that so that what you end up with is a very difficult string to guess. And that's probably my best practical comment advice back to you, Tom, in regards to that.
And for example, like LastPass or 1Password or whatever you choose to use, it'll take you through a very specific process, and it'll make sure that your password is extremely strong. You might notice on some sites how you get a sort of rating of your password, you know, 80 or 90 or 100. You know, those sort of LastPass and 1Password will make sure your password is, you know, 90 and above. So it is extremely hard to crack. I think we've got a Zoom question, maybe.
We'll repeat your question, Stuart.
Yeah.
So as long as we can hear you.
This is from Peter Carpenter. Is either of you using control folder access to inhibit ransomware attacks?
So the question is from Peter Carpenter. Are either of us using controlled folder access to inhibit ransomware attacks? I'm not. I'm using backups, daily and hourly backups that are taken to locations other than where my main server or data is stored, that are inaccessible to the device that's being backed up. So I'm achieving the outcome. The camera's there, Peter. I'm achieving that outcome through a different method. But Hugh, do you have any?
I'm doing the same as you. So I also do backups that are inaccessible to the device and therefore can be rolled back if there was a ransomware attack. And I mean, I've seen some people sort of get into trouble with those folders that have the controlled access to them. You know, they'll forget the password, or you know, something will happen and they'll lose access to it. So, but yeah, I mean, the short answer is no, I'm not. But once again, achieving the same sort of result in a different way.
I think I would add that there is a lot of merit in having access control, making sure this actually, you know, there's one of the points that we wrote down before this was there's an idea in IT called principle of least privilege, and that essentially means if you don't need access to something, you don't get access to something. So if we interpret control folder access, because I haven't heard of that exact phrase, but if we sort of, you know, interpret that as access control, then yes, if somebody does not need access to something in any system that I've got anything to do with, they will not get access to that. And I think you do have to be careful. If your backups or your data is so secure that you can't get to it, funny story, the start of this year, I was in a bridal party at a friend's wedding, and one of his other groomsmen, he had some login, it was his speech. He was the best man. It was his best man speech. And it was locked up in his password safe. And he had this 5-minute emergency where he was trying to get the encryption key off his phone to get onto his laptop so he could get his notes. And he was just full of anxiety for that 5 minutes, just as he's about to do a speech, which is not what you want to be priming yourself for psychologically, because his best man speech was so secure. So be pragmatic about how much security you really need. And so, yeah, like it is security can be technical, but if it doesn't work in your life, the way you use your stuff, I would, I guess, tune it so that it does work. So you don't find yourself in those unacceptably stressful situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Yeah, there's no point overdoing it if you don't need it.
Yeah, like everything, just like if you've got, you know, my first car was, you know, I bought it for $3,000 and it lost value very quickly, and I didn't put the highest quality insurance on it. And my newer car, which is a bit older now, I have, you know, full comprehensive on it because I proportionately respond to the value of the asset that I'm trying to protect. So I think some people find it difficult to translate that familiar thought process into an IT cybersecurity thing because they think, oh, this is a mysterious world of black magic. But I think get confident in sort of translating that thought process so you can make sensible, practical decisions about the posture that you take.
We started to talk about backups there. Do you want to just quickly finish up on backups?
Yes, in our final minute, backups, make sure that you can restore from the backups. So it's one thing, yeah, not to have it too encrypted and too secure. Make sure that you think, okay, there's that file, there's that text file that I know that I've got in that folder. Can you recover it? If you can't recover it, then that rehearsal has failed. The reason why we have fire drill evacuations in buildings and we practice is to make sure that we know how to carry those things out should there be an actual evacuation emergency. So do the same thing with your backup. That's probably all I have to say.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I've seen people that, you know, well, once again, they've encrypted their backup and they've forgotten the password.
Yeah,
the backup is encrypted, so
it's certainly safe.
Yeah, it's
but it hasn't helped them.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you are going to have that password on your backup, you know, make sure you do regularly do a restore, like Stephen said, and ensure you can get into it. And yeah, don't use anything too complicated. Like, there's a lot of great tools out there, and they're very effective tools. So just pick the one that suits you.
Yeah, I think every engineer in this room and on the Zoom knows don't overcomplicate something because it's just prone to problems.
I've just got one question. My family decided that my wife and I needed to have a safe, and you couldn't lift it with a crane. And it's got a combination lock, etc. I've given a copy of my combination lock to my kids so that, you know, if my wife and I fall off the perch, do you give access your password safe password to someone else so that if you happen to fall off the perch, they can got access to your information?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, same me. So yeah, like my wife has got access to my password safe.
Yeah, same.
And she's the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so that, you know, when you get to my age, you start to look at the fatalistic side of life and, you know, I don't want to fall off the perch and my family can't get access to...
I think it's the question, it's the way I'd sort of look at it is it valuable? Does it have something of value in there? Yes, most definitely it does. So would you treat it like other things you would in the context of a will? Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Just quickly, yes, one.
Just add something.
Yep.
Well done, guys.
Thank you.
In a former life, I was security evangelist for AVG Internet Security Software. Oh, it needs to be up a bit. So in a former life, I was security evangelist for AVG Internet Security Software, and I used to write a lot of articles and tour the company and do lots of talks and all the rest of it on just this sort of stuff. One of the key things is those passwords have got to be strong. Long is strong. Now, the problem is, how do you make them long and have a snowflake's chance in hell of remembering? There are some ways around that, and those sort of programs are one of them. But another way is also you need to make them complicated. And a lot of people struggle with ways to make them complicated. Most of us have hobbies. Most of us are involved with, in my case, it's things like I used to fly gliders. So other people used to drive certain cars. Other people might be into hi-fi software and everything. You know what? Stringing together the product IDs of numerous things, like the call sign of a glider combined with the the model ID of a hi-fi component, etc., etc. They're usually an absurd jumble of characters and stuff, right? And it works to make it complicated. And you only need 2 or 3 of them, and then just repeat a lot of stuff. You know, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, longer better, right? So there's simple ways to make it complicated, but still be a little bit meaningful to you. And that's one of the ways. Of course, the bane of your existence in doing that is you go to put in one of these long, complicated passwords that you've come up with, and then it goes, bing, no, it can't have this character, it can't have that character, it's got to have an uppercase this, etc., etc. Those things are the bane of my existence. But have a think about using that as a way to complicate passwords, and make sure they're at least 10 characters, preferably 15 or 20.
That's interesting. I'd say I call that password creativity. You just come up with a funny phrase that makes you think about something, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
And you'll get better at it. You'll get better at, as I would say, freestyling creative passwords that it's really going to be hard for somebody to guess.
You remember the model of that car, or its number plate, or the call sign of that glider, or the model of the glider, or the call sign of that boat, or the model of that boat, or that hi-fi component, etc. You know, and that sort of stuff will come to you, bring up favourable memories, and it's easy to do. My 2 cents worth.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Lloyd, and thanks again, Stephen and Hugh.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Now, I would hope that the gentleman at the back, because I'm sorry about this, Harry, we're running a bit late, but we've got Harry's on next, representing iHelp.
Hello, Dave. Okay, fine. One footnote to what our colleagues just said. In the area of our Microsoft service, roughly once a fortnight, we get a message from Microsoft to the effect that they've blocked sending from an account because it's been detected sending spam. Up to now, changing the password has always solved that problem. So somehow or other, somebody guessed the password. I would say if you happen to have continued to use one of the system generated passwords from Microsoft, which begins with 3 characters of a certain kind and ends with 5 of another kind, I strongly recommend you change it. Because anyone who knows that we've got the enterprise system we have will know that pattern, and it reduces the search area for guessing a password. Okay, now in a couple of minutes I'll be inviting anyone here who's got a question they want to throw at us to do so. I thought I would start with a couple of words about spam, because this has been a topic that's been discussed quite a lot recently. I don't have the time to explain the history of this term, so I'm just going to put a link in. So though it seems to, I seem to have made it a reply to Eunice, I've got to make it to everyone. Just a minute. Everyone. Sorry, do that again. There you go. So that's homework to watch that. Okay. You're probably mostly aware that an awful lot of email on the planet is spam. A recent summary suggests that in 2018, the annual global spam email rate was 55%. So it's on the decline from 2012 when it was 69%. We never see most of the spam directed to our own email addresses because it's been filtered out by the gatekeepers of our email services, Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, etc. A second filter is applied at each mailbox, and this is what populates our spam folders. junk to Microsoft. As long as what you find when you check your spam folder is unwanted mail, be grateful and don't worry, however much there is there. What annoys us is to find valued messages consigned to spam. How do you reduce or eliminate instances of good email being sent to your spam folder? There's been some vigorous discussion recently in Yammer on this topic, as some members are finding more valued messages in their new Google spam folders than they were finding in their Microsoft junk folders. If you're browsing your spam list and find a message that you don't regard as spam, you can mark it as not spam, which moves it to the inbox. It also, and importantly, educates the system spam police to treat messages like it more kindly in future. Google also provides a tool to do this explicitly in the 3-dot menu accessible from its message window. The main proviso here is that your email system spam police are hard of hearing. You need to identify non-spam while using webmail for the spam police to hear you. If you are moving messages from the spam folder in your local email program, the spam police can't hear that far. This applies even if you're using IMAP. After all, you'd expect it to apply if you were using POP. Here's also where webmail and IMAP users have it over POP users. They can see their spam folder from the same place where they can see their inbox. POP users need to log into webmail to see messages relegated to spam, as they will not have been downloaded by their email program. Whether your email host service is Microsoft's, Google's, Yahoo's, or whoever, it's important to check your system spam folder frequently, as messages that look totally innocent to you and me do sometimes get marked as spam. So that's my little introduction. Does anyone have any comments or questions on that topic? Can't hear, sorry.
He said he uses mail washer.
Okay. Now, mail washer is a spam checker that operates after your email host service spam checker has done its job. This is a distinction I was anxious to try and bring out because it turns out to be something that isn't always understood. All email coming in effect for our members through Microsoft or Google has been spam checked. To take the simplest case, if you are getting your email on your desktop using POP, you will never ever see what that spam checker has already done. MailWasher is not the server. It doesn't operate at that level. It can only deal with mail that's already been spam checked. And that's the reason why, if you are using any other system to look at spam, you must look at the server spam folder. And for that, with one possible exception, which doesn't apply to Google, you will need to use webmail, because that's the only way you will ever see what's on the spam folder on the server. You will only get into your inbox what's passed muster with the server spam police. Whether it's worth doing a second filter, I very much doubt. If you're using third-party email services that may not have the AI resources that the really big boys have got, it might be wise to think of a secondary filter. the easiest way to educate yourself about this is simply to look at the server spam folder. And there will always be messages that slip by. I'll have a brief word about that. But on the whole, what members are finding is that there's too much in that spam folder and not too little. I assume Mailwasher will not remove from spam things you don't think is spam unless you've interposed your own whitelisting service to do what you could have already done with the server. And I explain that further if anyone wants to know what it means. Okay, any other issues, questions?
Yes, Tom, I'll repeat it. Did you hear that, Harry?
I'm afraid I didn't know.
No. What Tom was saying is that is there any way, if he's got spam comes into his inbox and he knows it's spam and he's not happy with it, what can he do? He made mention of his mother-in-law, but I don't know whether that's relevant.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this works both ways. You can mark, you know, certainly in the webmail systems, you can mark any message as spam. That will immediately relegate it to the spam or junk folder and will help to educate the system in the opposite direction. Let me just say a quick word about whitelisting too, because that is a very simple way of moving towards whitelisting. But whitelisting is when you tell the service you are talking to regard messages typically from a particular sender as not spam. So that will prevent it moving it to the spam folder. And in the Google's tools here in the webmail are more explicit than Microsoft's tools, because you can click that those three dots, and you can tell it that the message is or is not spam, and it moves it in the two directions. There's also another option, which is accessible slightly more easily with Google, to create a rule, a whitelisting rule. You can get to that in a more roundabout way, but you can get to it directly from an email. So what you tell Google or Microsoft is any message from this sender is okay. And you can do that for whole domains as well as for individual sending addresses. Both those services have that feature. It's just that the way you get it to work is slightly different in each case.
Thanks, Harry. Any other questions from the floor? I'm not sure whether you've got any on Zoom there. Have you, Harry?
I'm not seeing any, but then I should have the chat on, shouldn't I? Just a minute. Let's have a look in chat. I'm not seeing anything at the moment. They've all gone to listen to the song, I think.
Any further questions from anyone here? Yeah, hang on. Yes, Tom has another one.
Good old Tom.
Tom wants to know, can he create a blacklist from his inbox?
Oh, sure. I say that this is a two-way street. I won't waste time by putting it in front of my nose now. But yes, you can in Google, the three dots will give you the menu that enables you to blacklist as much as it enables you to whitelist. But you've got to be slightly cautious about this. The nastiest kind of spam, and it's often phishing, it's often worse than any old spam, is where somebody else's account has been hacked in the way I mentioned at the beginning, and you don't want to block all mail from that address. Now, as long as you know who it is, you're not going to make that mistake. You're going to phone them up and say, do you realize your account has been hacked? But it's important to realize that whitelisting and blacklisting work on everything that satisfies the criterion. Now, when the spam police, who are highly paid artificial intelligence programs with lots and lots of different features, filter out messages, they're not typically using just one criterion like the sending address. They will look at a number of features. They look at the whole message. They look at it, whether it's got an attachment. They don't publish these rules, but we've got a rough idea what they are. And they're going to look at a number of different features of a message, including its content, whether it includes the word password and so on and so on. And it's a probabilistic bit of reasoning. And that's why sometimes things get through that you think shouldn't, because you're, as a human reader, even more intelligent than that algorithm. But what they're doing is rather different from what we do when we whitelist and blacklist, because we finger usually a single criterion, typically an email address. But what they're doing is much cleverer. So you need to be aware that you're actually wielding quite a blunt instrument. And you want to be careful that there isn't collateral damage when you do that. I'm not saying it's not a good thing to do, particularly if you have persistent messages from, I don't know, a commercial organization who should be letting you unsubscribe anyway, by the way. That's okay, but be just a little bit careful. Remember that you might miss things you really wanted to see.